Did you know that you could be proud of the music you're making 90 days from now, even if you've never made music before? All it takes is a commitment to 5 minutes a day. Yep, just 5 minutes and you'll embark on a transformative journey into music production and self-discovery. Can you spare that? I'm Ill Gates, and I've spent 20 years distilling my experiences with Grammy-winning artists, making tracks played over 65 million times into something epic for you, the producer's path. Let me ask you this. How many unfinished projects do you have sitting on your hard drive right now?
It's over 9,000! What?
How many tutorials have you watched without making real progress?
At least a year and a half.
6 years of
hundreds of hours on YouTube.
I was frustrated and all in all pretty upset with my music.
The biggest problem facing music producers today isn't a lack of information. It's information overload. You're drowning in tutorials, tips, and techniques. But here's what nobody's telling you. Watching tutorials isn't the same as making music. Reading about production isn't producing. And buying new plugins won't fix your workflow. I know because I've been there. Back when I started, I spent countless hours watching videos, buying gear, trying to piece everything together, but nothing really clicked until I discovered the missing piece, a structured, organized path forwards. Think about martial arts for a moment. You don't start by trying to break boards. You master the fundamentals first. But in music production, everyone's trying to learn the flashy moves before they can throw a proper punch. It's backwards. It's why so many talented producers never reach their potential. That's why I created the Producer's Path. It's not just another course, it's a complete transformation of how you approach music production.
Right away, my music got way better.
This really accelerated transformation.
The transformation's incredible.
The best things I could have done.
I started making music that makes me happy, that I'm proud to release.
I couldn't believe that I could make an actual beat with a build-up, intro, and drop in 30 minutes.
You don't need to be born rich, you don't need to be born gifted. All you need is a commitment to spending 5 minutes a day on music. The Producer's Path is a proven system that has supported top artists throughout the industry. And now it's your turn to access these secrets and forge your own unique sound. As you journey through the 12 levels of the Producer's Path, each step designed to build your skills and confidence, you'll not only learn music production, but also discover how to express your individual style, breaking the rules like a true artist. Join our vibrant Producer Dojo community, get feedback on your tracks, and maybe even feature on a Dojo mixtape. With no subscriptions and free updates for life, your path to music mastery is evergreen, and you can come back again and again and again, getting more out of it each time.
Dude, the way you laid it out teaching is prime.
It has been amazing.
very enlightening, like phenomenally.
And it is just so nice having someone be like, okay, here's what you do first. Like, this is what you want to learn first.
It's what I wish someone had taught me. It's what I wish I knew from the jump. If you had to pick only one skill, this would be that skill. You're probably going to want to start by doing this exact process. It would have saved me years of frustration and thousands of dollars in wasted equipment purchases. So let's talk about why most producers struggle to progress and why it's not their fault. The first mistake is what I call the tutorial trap. You watch video after video, learning individual techniques, but never really understanding how they all fit together. It's like having 1,000 puzzle pieces without the picture on the box. You might eventually figure it out, but it's going to take way longer than necessary this way.
The big mistake, the number 2 mistake.
Gear obsession or gas.
I've got too much gear.
But here's the truth.
You want answers! I want the truth! You can't handle the truth!
Tools are only as good as the person using them. I've heard amazing music made on laptops and terrible music made on $100,000 studio setups.
Tip number 3 comes from my buddy Ill Gates.
The third and most devastating mistake is the isolation. Making music alone, without feedback, without community support. Every producer who's made it has had mentors and peers helping them grow.
All right, I'll give it a try.
No, try not. Do or do not. There is no try.
You'll be learning alongside other serious producers, getting real feedback on your music, and building relationships that will last your entire career.
It's pretty easy to establish a sense of community within the dojo.
It's like real people. It just feels so good to have such a supportive community of people
Honestly, the best community I've ever been a part of, hands down.
The dojo changed my life.
The dojo has definitely made the biggest impact to my music. I've had so many eureka moments.
Yeah, man, my workflow before was definitely my biggest issue, and after this week, it's like completely taken a 180. It's crazy. And things that I thought that weren't gonna be fun ended up being really fun.
Feeling so good about the music that I'm making and having a better direction.
All the tools that you need to succeed as an artist in one place.
The catalogs of resources that are almost infinite.
This experience has definitely helped me grow as a producer. It was a blast.
I can't even begin to describe the feeling of being able to express yourself creatively without limits, and actually be able to finish your music and then be proud of the music that you've made.
I finished better tracks in half the time.
It can take you from wherever you're at in your production to where you want to go.
I think you'd be surprised yourself as far as where you can take your music.
I have gained a sense of self-worth that I have not felt in a very, very long time. The dojo has helped me get there.
If you've ever asked why making deep, lasting personal changes seems easy for some and difficult for others, you're asking the right question, because that's the question that allows you to remix your life. You are your habits. There is some important habit creation science that you can take advantage of. Gail Matthews at Dominican University identified 3 goal factors that, when used together, more than double your likelihood of success. So the first one is clarifying your vision. Break your vision down and commit to those actions. What small step can you take every day that will get you there, and commit to tracking that action? Step 2, humans are social creatures, and if you share your commitment with others you respect, that will tap into unconscious biological programming, creating a positive form of peer pressure. And then step 3 is create regular accountability with a third party, and in Dr. Matthews' research, they found that weekly check-ins work best. So you just need to find someone who will check in with you every week 12 times. That's it. The people who are the real crushers at Remix Your Life, the people who do the best, who make the biggest changes, the most music, the most dramatic before and after transformations, are the ones with the easiest goals. You don't even have to take more than an hour to do it. Tiny, tiny little habits are the ones that add up and make a big and lasting change. Here is a video from a ninja in the dojo called Squidot, and he made so much music, but his big studio goal was 5 minutes. 5 minutes. You have 5 minutes a day. 5 minutes a day. Every day will take you to the mountain. So here's Squidot.
What's up, Dojo fam? Squidot here. I am super pumped to say that I have accomplished 100% of my goals for the first quarter of Remixing My Life. So I picked up a lot of great daily habits, been journaling every day, gotten 13 books read, I've been doing yoga and exercising, meditating daily, which has been super powerful. I've been in the studio every single day working in Ableton, and I've gotten 104 beats done total during the challenge. And on top of all of it, I have started an online business with my wife, so I'm super excited for that, and we'll just see where that takes us. But I just wanted to thank Dylan, everyone at the dojo, everyone behind the scenes, the senseis. You guys are super awesome. Last but not least, just a huge shout out to the community. You guys are the glue that holds everything together. You guys are super inspiring, super humbling, just so helpful and welcoming. I'm very happy that I found the dojo and that I'm able to call you guys my family. So thank you so much for everything, and I will catch you on the flip side. Peace out.
The Producer's Path 2.0 is everything you need to transform your music production journey. This complete 12-level program takes you from wherever you are now to making music you're proud of in 90 days. Or your money back. Who else could possibly offer a guarantee like that? Like, when do you hear that? You don't. The proof is in the pudding. I mean, you don't get to do what I do for as long as I've done what I do if people don't love it, right? That's why crazy names give me real testimonials that I get to use on my page. You know, they all say thank you. I mean, many of them are so grateful that they hooked me up with these crazy gigs. Like, that's how I got to do a track with Gucci Mane. It was because Ionize was so grateful for what he learned that he brought me in on that. It was crazy to get to work with Gucci Mane, but it's because what I teach is so effective that these students come back again and again and say thanks.
You know, I joined Il Gates, who's a electronic producer.
Right.
He has a thing called Producer Dojo, where I'm taking one-on-one lessons. So shouts out to Il Gates and everybody there.
It's a workflow that was taught to me by my mentors, especially Il Gates.
What Il Gates has been calling bus mastering.
Dylan is a genius, technical genius at this stuff.
Dylan is an amazing teacher.
You're getting like industry like tips and things in production tips from somebody that's been doing this for their whole life, Il Gates.
So when I look back on my life, it's pretty wild. I mean, I never thought that I would be a professional musician when I was a kid. Think of like early high school on the left there. That was how it started. By 1998, I was making my own beats. You can see me on an MPC 2000 with floppy disks on top of my synthesizer. My friends in art school and I would connect with breakdancers and graffiti artists, and we also built giant robots and stuff. And there is one of our giant robots being used as a stage piece at the 5th annual World Electronic Music Festival. I ended up getting a chance to get my demo in the ear of the people at Two Wars, and they liked it. And I was just chopping up samples. I didn't know what I was doing at all. My songs were full of illegal samples, but I guess they were good enough that they got me in Herb magazine as part of the Next 100, where they spotlight a bunch of emerging artists. This record, Ice Nine, made a huge difference in my life. So that was 2003, 2004. Started playing at Shambhala, and then started making templates.
Hi, I'm the Fat Conductor. I'm an audio-video artist from Toronto, Canada, and I also teach music and design templates for Ableton Live. I'm here today to demonstrate a mouseless DJ and beat juggling template that I've created for the trigger finger, but it is able to be used from any MIDI controller provided that you have knobs, shaders, and buttons at your disposal.
You know, I've been told that like the biggest thing that I need to work on is actually communicating to people on the other side what the real value of the dojo is.
Really, I have to say Producer Dojo has affected my music career more than anything else. If it were not for me, you know, one day just clicking on that link on Facebook, you know, to sign up, then I don't think I would be here at Bigfoot Electro.
Joining the dojo within a year just took me from there just way up to making music that you could feel, that I feel proud of.
I feel amazing to be on the other side of all these goals that I had for myself.
It's incredible. Just walking into it, it's like, it's jaw-dropping. You're finally here. It's like you've reached, like, I don't want to say the promised land, but that's how it feels.
So to demonstrate that this is real, I want to show you a couple videos that are me rolling out the 128s technique for the first time in the world in 2010. Amon Tobin and Eskimo had a project called Eskimon. They asked me to program the Ableton Pack, and I was like, these guys are two of my heroes. I want to make the best damn Ableton Pack and tutorial that I could. And I had this secret technique called Making 128s.
Hey, what's up, Ableton fans? This is your boy Il Gates. As I mentioned before, I like to use what's called 128s, where you have 128 samples of a given type and you split them up into samplers.
That was in like 2010. I'd invented the technique maybe 2006, 2007, 2008. Somewhere in that range.
If you don't know what 128s are, they're a workflow hack in Ableton invented by Il Gates.
In this tutorial, I'll demonstrate how to create what are often referred to as 128s.
And today I'm going to get into making 128.
Today I'm going to show you how to make 128.
Today I want to show you how to make 128.
And there is a way to do this better, and it's called 128.
Just 128 and 128 samples.
128.
128.
128.
128 from 128. 128.
128 of 128 of 128 samples. 128.
128.
128.
And I made this search script and I ran it, And I got so many results back that I had to make a whole second piece of software just to put all these clips together. There's that many. And you can check, like these are public videos on YouTube that have almost nothing to do with me except for the fact that they're using my techniques and my ideas. And they're like, oh my God, I got a mind-blowing tutorial in the mid-2020s. It's 128s. And it's like, yeah, that was almost 20 years ago, that technique. And it's like 20 years later, it's still cutting edge. People still use the Infinite Drum Rack as their main drum rack in their studio template that they don't change. And it was in 2014.
Now on to the Infinite Drum.
I also love your Infinite Drum Rack, the Infinite Drum Rack here.
So that's called the Infinite Drum Rack. It's
like an infinite drum.
People now are blowing minds with mud pies and 128s. The stuff that's in the Ill Methodology workshop is basically Rick Rubin's book. Like, if you check out the full workshop and you check out Rick Rubin's book, The Creative Act, they're pretty similar. And the Ill Methodology was 2011. So if you want to be 10 plus years ahead of everybody, I got you. All right? I want you to know,
through persistence, you can make it.
You are not going to regret your decision to sign up for the Producer's Path.
And I want to have a product that I can show my children's children who I was. Never found the answer until I went to the Producer's Path.
If you're ready to move beyond just making music and you want to learn how to become a better producer, that's when you take the Producer Path.
I want you to know that I love you, and I'm forever grateful to everyone who is a part of the dojo and who chooses to take these courses. I get so excited when new people come in because I remember what that was like. And I know that I have exactly what you need. And what you're gonna feel when you get it.
Huge breakthrough.
Game changers.
Whatever I want now, I can put it into a song.
Like, just blows my mind.
And I can feel it in my music, the textures, the sounds. It gives me goosebumps every time I hear it nowadays.
I'm like, fucking give me more, man. Give me more.
And the growth that is going to happen across many domains of your life, when I'm like facing death, I'm going to remember that I did that for people and it's going to be okay. So you can't buy that. So I get really excited, and I know that whether you're brand new to Ableton or whether you're a very experienced producer who's hit a plateau and you're looking to break through to the next level, the Producer's Path has all the things for you. You can do it on fast mode and easy, make it super easy and like just breeze through it and get crazy results, especially if you've never explored creativity before. Like, you will be a different person by the end. But if you're someone who's been producing for as long as I have, there's still going to be stuff that you're like, I had no idea this whole time that there was this other way of thinking about these fundamental things. So I know it's going to give you what you want, what you need. I know it's going to take your music to the next level, and I know you won't regret it. You're in the right community, you're with the right peeps. All you got to do now is take that first step.
Put your music where your mouth is. Start your career and get the ball rolling, all right?
I highly recommend anybody who is on the fence to actually get signed up right now.
I suggest anybody that wants to take their music seriously and wants to step that shit up to the next level.
Get in there and sign up.
Step in my dojo, you. Step in my dojo, you. Step in my.
So lots of love, and I'm gonna play those videos for you now, and you can see. Okay, thanks for watching.
Hi, I'm Ill Gates, and one thing that I love to do is make chaotic recordings of parameter movements while resampling them. I call the file that results a mud pie.
Hello. Today we're going to make a mud pie.
So, I want to talk about mud pies.
Awesome, right?
So what are we doing here? These are mud pies. The term mud pie, I believe, was coined by Ill Gates.
I'm going to introduce you to a concept called mud pies. I was calling them idea jams for a while, but then Ill Gates was like, nah, man, I call those mud pies. And I was like, that's a great name. I'm going to call them that too.
Mud pie.
Mud pies. Mud pie. Mud pie.
Mud pie.
Oh, mud pie.
Mud pie.
Mud pies.
Mud pie. Mud pie. Mud pie.
Mud pie. Mud pie.
Mud pie.
Mud pie. Mud pie.
Mud pie.
Mud pies.
Mud pie.
Mud pies. Mud pie.
Pies. Mud pie.
Mud pie. Mud pies.
Mud pie.
Mud pie.
Mud pies.
Mud pie.
Mud pie.
Mud pie.
Mud pie.
Mud pies. Mud pies.
Mud pies.
Mud pies.
Mud pie. Mud pie.
Mud pies. Mud pie.
Mud pie.
Mud pie.
Mud pies.
Mud pie.
Mud pie.
Mud pie.
Mud pies. Mud pie. Mud pie.
Mud pie. Mud pie.
Mud pie.
Mud pie.
Mud pie. Mud pies. Mud pie. Mud pie. It's mud pie.
Mud pies. Say mud pie.
Mud pie. Mud pie.
Mud pie.
Mud pie.
Mud pie. Mud pie.
Heard of the mud pie.
Yeah. Mud pie. Mud pie.
Mud pie.
Mud pies. Mud pie.
Mud pie. Mud pie.
Mud pie.
Mud pies. Mud pies.
Mud pound. Mud pie.
Mud pie.
Mud pie. Mud pies.
Mud pies. Mud pie. Mud pie.
Mud pie.
Mud pies. Long mud. Mud pie.
Mud pie. Mud pie.
The mud pie. Mud pie.
Mud pie. Mud pie. Mud pie. Mud pie. Mud pie. Mud pie. Mud pie.
Mud pie. Mud pie.
Mud pie. Mud pie.
Mud pie. The mud pie. Mud pie. Mud pie.
Mud pie.
Mud pie. Mud pies.
Mud pie.
Mud pies. Mud pies. Mud pies.
Mud pie.
Mud pie. Mud pie.
Mud pie.
Mud pie. Mud pies. Mud pies.
Mud pie. Mud pie. Mud pies.
Mud pies. Mud pie.
Mud pie.
Mud pie. Mud pie. Mud pie.
Mud pies. Quote mud pie.
Mud pie. Mud pie. Mud pie. Mud pies. Mud pies. Mud pies.
Mud pies. Mud pie.
Mud pies. It's mud pie.
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 Mud pie. Mud pie. Mud pie. Mud pie. It's mud pie.
Mud pie. Mud pie. Mud pie.
Mud pie.
Mud pie.
Mud pie. Mud pies. Mud pies.
In mud pie.
Mud pie.
Mud pie. Mud pie.
Mud pie.
Mud pie. So
Mud pie.
Mud pie.
Mud pie.
mud pies.
Mud pie. Mud pie. Mud pie. Mud pies.
Mud pie.
Mud pie. Mud pie. Mud pie. Mud pie.
Mud pie.
Mud pies. Mud pies. Mud pie.
And mud pies. Mud pies.
Mud pies. Mud pie. Mud pie. It's mud pie.
Mud pie. Mud pies.
Mud pie. Mud pie. Mud pie. Mud pie.
It's mud pie.
Mud pie. Mud pie.
Mud pies.
Mud pie.
Mud pie. Mud pie.
Mud pie.
Mud pie. Mud pie.
Mud pie.
Oh, mud pie. Yeah, mud pie. Mud pie. Mud pies. Mud pie. Mud pie.
Mud pies. Mud pie. Mud pies. Say mud pie.
Mud pie.
It's mud pie.
Mud pie. Mud pie.
Mud pie.
Mud pie.
Mud pie.
Mud pie.
Mud pies.
Mud pies. It's mud pies.
Mud pies. Mud pie.
Mud pie. You make the mud pie. Mud pie. Mud pie. Mud pie.
Mud pie.
Mud pie. Mud pie.
Mud pie. Mud pies.
Mud pies. Mud pie.
Mud pie. It's mud pies. Mud pie.
Mud pies.
Sir mud pie. Ill Gates.
Yeah.
Ill Gates.
Ill Gates, which we
Ill Gates.
Ill Gates music. Still Gates album. Still.
Ill Gates and
Ill Gates, actually.
Ill Gates and illgates.com.
Ill Gates music. IllGates.com.
Ill Gates because
Ill Gates. Ill Gates.
Ill Gates and
Ill Gates and Ill Gates is technical.
Ill Gates.
Ill Gates and
Ill Gates.
yeah.
Oh, Ill Gates. My
Ill Gates. Exclusive.
Ill.Gates. I'll get OT.
Ill Gates.
Ill Gates because
Ill Gates. Ill Gates music.
Ill Gates and Ill Gates.
Ill Gates is 120.
Ill Gates technical.
Who Ill Gates to Ill Gates. He's
Ill Gates music. Ill Gates music. Illgates.com. Ill Gates music. Ill Gates back.
Ill Gates and
Ill Gates.
Ill Gates, actually.
Ill Gates and
Ill Gates and Ill Gates on
Ill Gates.
Ill Gates. According
to Ill Gates and
I'll get into
Ill Gates labels.
Ill Gates, you call Bill Gates.
Well,
Ill Gates name.
Ill Gates named Ill Gates. People.
Ill Gates invented.
Hey, Ill Gates. Hello.
Ill Gates.
Ill Gates. Wow.
Ill Gates talk. Ill Gates.
Ill Gates is. Ill Gates is.
Ill Gates. It's
Ill Gates. 128 different
128s, but 128 isn't like 128s are 128. So
There's one on the 28th. Just
128s. Now 128. This 128 and 128 sample.
128. The 128 samples in 128 is 128 MIDI or 128 options.
128s and
it's 128, right?
128 since 128 is 128s or up to 128s.
128 different 128 free.
128 30
and 128s for
128 samples.
128 samples. 128 128 samples. 128 different
128s for 128 simpler.
128. So
128. You 128 sample.
128s.
128 sample.
128 loops. 128 loops.
128 Elgate 128
to 128.
Hold 128 sample.
128.
128s. 128 versus 128.
But 128.
Means 128 samples.
128 sample. 128 different.
128.
128s new.
128.
128 like 128 different.
And 128 is 128.
128 sample and 128, right?
In 128s and in a 128
is 128. I put 128s for
128s.
128s. 128 loops.
128s to 128. Now 128. What? How? 128 sample and 128 sample. 128. But
128 sounds.
128. So in really 128, right? And
128, but
for 128, right? And 128. Right, but
128 samples.
These 128s, right? For 128.
So these 128s.
I mean 128s or
128s and 128. So 128 samples, 128.
128. 128. So
128 of 128 sample. 128s. This 128s.
128s and 128s. If you 128s,
like 128 and
128 rack.
128.
So 128 different.
Like 128. Now in 128s and 128s, rhythmic 128s versus 128s, and
128s concept 128 synths. 128s think 128 chain.
128.
128s with
128
128s are 128 full 128.
228 and 128, but
128 so 128.
There's 128 differently 128 cells. 128. And 128. So 128 different. 128 kick, 128 and
128 slice.
128 other. 128 sample.
128. It's 128. Now 128. So we're going to create a new multi-sample again. And 128s are 128 for
128s. Right.
128 sample.
128 parts.
128 of
128 sample for 128 kicks. 128 clap. 128 up.
128s then 128s then.
That's 128. So 128.
So 128, right?
A 128. That's 128.
128. Exactly 128.
128. With 128. It's
128, whatever, 127, 120, or 127, 128 kick.
128 sample.
128s and
128.
This 128 sampler.
128s are 128s, but 128 with 128. Now 128 and 128 is 128. Slice
128s or
128s.
So 128 different 128 sample. 128, but
128 because 128 is 128 kicks.
128 sample.
128s and 128s.
128. If 128s are
128 samples.
128 different. 128 sample. 128 samples.
That's 128 keys.
128 and 128s. The
128 power.
128 different.
Well, 128s. Right.
128s
or 128. How is
128 sample 127. And
128.
128
128s for
128 usable
128s today. 128s are 128s and
128 sample.
A 128. Right. At least 128 or drag 128 sample 128. So
128 for
128 sample.
128s just
128 sample.
128s which
128 sample 128 so
128 and
128s for
128. There's 128, so 128 and 128 sample
of
128 kick.
128. And 128, well, 128 different.
128, selectors.
128s or up to 128s. Check
128 of
128 slot and 128 of
128 slice, 128s, and 128s on.
128, Grick, 128 sample.
128. So 128, 100, 128 different.
128 from
128, 128s, 128.
128 of
128's quick.
Mic 128. Friendly.
128 sample.
128s in
128, right?
Mic 128.
128 samples, 128 samples.
128. And there's 128 sample.
128.
If he 128 sample, 128. There's
128 per
128 because 128 is 128 kick. 128 is it's 128 samples. 128.
Your 128 set.
128 slots, 127, but 128.
128, 128 sample, 128 sample.
128.
128s. 128s are 128 sample.
128s what?
128 save. 128s. I have 128s and 128s out. 128s or
128s, whereas 128. So 128 stuff.
Or 128 from 128s of
128.
128 racks.
128ths even.
128.
Like 128 into
128. The 128 sample. For 128. After 128.
128.
128. So these
128, you can
Mic 128 all
or 128s if like 128 kick.
a rhythmic 128.
Then 128 different.
128. 128 better. 128 here.
128 and
128s of
128. Almost
128.
saying 128s. This 128.
Mic 128. All
128s.
128s what?
120.
128. Especially 128 is like 128 like
128 different.
128th note. 128th note.
128 here is 128s.
128 options. 127 is 128 options. 128 kicks.
128 rack.
128. Which
128 different 128 different 128 but
128 in 128. A 128 if 128 with
Eating 128 different 128s. So
128s. These 128 samples. And 128 is 128 mid or 128 options.